Hello, this video is a presentation of the work published in Cryptography and Network Security 2021 by Radar Fawi, Gildas Savoine, Olivier Gimenez, and Jack Traoré. I'm Olivier Gimenez, and I'm going to tell you more about how distance bounding can detect internet traffic hijacking. So basically, an hijacking attack is defined by any malicious modification of the path between two nodes. These attacks can, however, aim to drop the communications between A and B. In that case, the goal for network administrators will be to quickly restore the services, but the attack will be instantly detected by nature. Or these attacks can also aim to relay the communications between A and B, which would potentially allow the attacker to handle critical metadata if he can perform this attack over a long period. In that case, the goal is indeed to detect the presence of a relay as soon as it is possible to do. It is important to see that this kind of attack happens quite frequently. For instance, in 2008, YouTube became unreachable for nearly 3 hours when Pakistan Telecom shared a false BGP announcement, which attracted all YouTube traffic through their servers. 2 years later, no less than 15% of internet communications were routed directly through China, impacting big corporations like Yahoo or IBM, but also some very important American military websites. And more recently, in 2019, many telecom traffic were also rerouted through China, but because of a wrong routing configuration from a company based in Switzerland. Those three events, given their very noticeable impact, they were quickly detected. But in 2017, Apostolaki, Van Bever, and Zohar showed in their article that a stealthier relay attack could potentially cause important damages to the Bitcoin blockchain. So we see that detecting relay attacks can be of critical importance. And to the best of our knowledge today, the best example of relay detection can be found in a radio frequency identification context. So this would be the starting point of our presentation. So radio frequency allows two items to communicate. And to give a very simple example, let's say a smart card and a payment device or terminal. This technology allows close-range communication, so when the smart card, the prover, will come in some range of the verifier, the communication will start and, for instance, a payment will be performed. The problem with radio frequency authentication is the so-called mafia fraud attack described by Desmet, Goutier, and Bengio in 1987. And the idea is for the attacker to have a device which is able to simulate the verifying process of the verifier, and also a device which is able to simulate the proving process of a verifier. And by using those two devices, an attacker is able to relay the communication between a prover and a verifier. And for instance, here, the attacker is able to pay something with the money of the real prover. So an immediate countermeasure that comes in mind to avoid this kind of attack is to bound the distance between the real prover and the verifier by using time measurement. But we will see that time measurement is not enough, because if we assume a very simple protocol like this, where the verifier sends to the prover a constant identifier before computing a timestamp, and wait for a payment request from the prover to compute another timestamp, well, a relay attack can still happens as long as the attacker knows the constant identifier of the verifier. So if the attacker pre-plays the protocol with the real prover, the attacker receives the payment request and then can perform the real protocol with the verifier, and the attack is still valid. So we need to parallelize time measurement and authentication in this context. So for instance, if we take once again our very simple protocol but add a signature from the prover in it, so the verifier compute the timestamp, send his constant identifier, but also a random challenge C to be signed by the prover. The prover responds his payment request along with the signature, and now an attacker cannot pre-play the protocol because he cannot guess the random challenge. So he will have to wait to receive the challenge from the real verifier, but now he has to perform a complete relay between the prover and the verifier, and by measuring the time, the verifier will conclude that an attack is ongoing. So the attacker, whether can validate the authentication, whether can validate the time requirements, but can never validate both. Historically, this idea of bounding the distance was first presented as an enhancement of the famous Fiat-Shamir zero-knowledge protocol. This protocol, for those who don't know, allows one to prove his knowledge of his secret key by responding to a series of binary challenges sent from the verifier. But as it is, an attacker, which is relaying the communications between P and D, will systematically get authenticated. So in 1994, Browns and Shum slightly modified this protocol so the verifier can collect a set or a sample of round-trip time measurements during the process of authentication. Now the final verification is twofold. You can see in green the authentication verification. This verification remains the same as it was in Fiat-Shamir, but now, as you can see in blue, there is also a time verification function, which takes as entry the sample of the measurements which was done in the fast bit exchange, and decide whether or not to accept this sample. This decision function is actually very simple and is based on the physical restriction that no information can travel faster than light. So the function will accept if the greater of the measurements is below bound t, and this bound t is nothing but the time that light would have taken to travel a user-defined distance d. So the idea is indeed to bound the distance between the verifier and the prover, and then to detect a relay. Now let's go back to the specific context of the internet. The very first difference to take into account is that here the first goal of the communication is to send some information or messages from a sender S to a receiver R. So from now on I will refer to these messages as a set of packets, PIs. The question is, can we use time measurements in this context to detect the presence of a relay during the sendings of those packets? Let's assume for the moment that we have. So that we dispose of a black box function, decision function, called verify time, and that this function is able to distinguish properly between a standard communication and a relayed one. And let me describe quickly our authentication process. Our protocol asks for the receiver to acknowledge each reception with a bit, Ri, so that the prover can compute a round-trip time for every packet. Upon sending a satisfying amount of packets, here k, R will hash and sign all their exchange, and by verifying this signature, S will make sure that firstly R has well received the packets, and secondly that the responses Ri were produced by him. So at the end, R is authenticated and S is sure that the exchange hasn't been modified. Now we need to check if it is possible to define such a time decision function. So first of all, we need to identify the differences between radio frequency identification and internet communication. In the first case, as radio frequency identification is used on close-range communication, the timings are very small and very stable, which allowed us to compute an accurate distance and to bound this distance by a simple computation. This is not the case for Internet communication because there is many intermediaries in the exchange, as when a node sends a packet, these packets will go through a given amount of routers, and so the timescales are completely different. So compute an accurate distance in Internet communication is not possible. But in this context, the presence of a relay might be much more impacting because every routing protocol used perform an optimization of the chosen route between two nodes. That is to say, a piece of information will travel as fast as possible between the two nodes. And inserting a relay in this communication might very probably increase drastically the time between the sending and the response receiving from the sender. So basically we need to ask three questions. The first one is, how stable is the round-trip time between two fixed machines? The second is, what happens over a long period of time? Is this time remain stable? And of course, how does a relay impact the measures? To answer these three questions, I'm going to present to you the measures that we performed on the internet. So we used four machines, which I label A, B, C, and D for the rest of this presentation. But here is their location in France. And we use two programs in C, namely sender.c and receiver.c, to communicate. So sender.c will compute a timestamp before sending a UDP packet, waiting for a response, and as it receives a response, it computes another timestamp, and then computes the round-trip time between him and the receiver. And of course, the receiver only waits for messages, and when he receives them, he instantly sends back a response. To simulate a relay or an hijacking, we introduced a third program, intermediary.c, which just relay the communication between the sender and the receiver. And here is a typical example of what looks like a gathered sample from our protocol. So I remind you that a run of the protocol contains K, a parameter K, exchange between the sender and the receiver. Here, each point you see represents the computation of one round-trip time. So in this case, the value of K is 1024. So I represent in the y-axis the time in milliseconds of each round-trip times for the exchange, and in the x-axis only the number of RTT that was gathered. So as we can see in this figure, for one sample, the stability of the measurement is pretty satisfying. Because we can see that the measurements stand between around 15 milliseconds and 20 milliseconds. And of course, there is a few values which go much higher, but the majority of them is stuck in this interval of 15 milliseconds and 20 milliseconds. So over the course of one run of the protocol, we can answer to the first question as the time seems to be pretty stable. Here I represent three different samples, so the one in green, the one in red, and the one in blue. And those samples are also an exchange between node A and node C. There is once again 1024 packets, so 1024 round-trip times that were computed, but those three measurements were performed at different days of the year. So the first one was collected in mid-December 2020. The second one was collected in mid-January 2021, and the third one was collected early March 2021. So over the course of 4 months, we can see that there is almost no differences between those three samples, and we can then assume that the timings between two given nodes doesn't change over time. And finally, when we simulate a relay, we can see that the two samples are largely distinguishable even for the human eye. That is to say, the sample which I display in blue is a communication between node D and node B without the presence of a relay, and the sample which I display in red is the same communication but with the presence of a relay. With that in mind, we now need to build a suitable decision function. So this function will take as entry the times gathered over one run of the protocol and decide to accept or reject the sample. As we just saw, the samples are stable and remains stable over a long period of time. Also, the presence of a relay highly impacts the measurements. So what we need is an initial sample which could be used as a reference to be compared with the freshly gathered ones. That is to say, before the very first use of the protocol, the sender will compute a large amount of round-trip times with the receiver, and then it will store this sample and keep it for the next use of the protocol. Of course, we need to assume that during the construction of this sample, of this reference sample, no relay was ongoing. This is a strong assumption, but we have to make it. Then, for each run of the protocol, S can compare the collected sample with its reference. And given that the times doesn't change over large periods, this reference can be reused at will. Now, upon gathering a new sample, the prover can expect that its mean will be very close from the mean of its reference. And he can choose to reject it if their difference is greater than a given threshold. As you can see in this figure, the means of the red sample, which is a relayed one, is 20 milliseconds away from the blue one. And so this sample should be rejected. Of course, the question is how we can define this threshold. We cannot choose an arbitrary threshold because an attacker can potentially be able to make a relay more performant than the one that you see on this figure. So we need to link our decision, our threshold, with our reference sample. So there is, for instance, a reference sample. This sample is made from around 2,500 measurements, round-trip time measurements, and we want to link our threshold for the decision with this reference sample. First of all, to eliminate all the extreme value, for instance, the one that we have on top of this figure, I will define the p density interval. This is the smallest interval containing p% of the values of the sample. So here I display it in red, and I label the length of this interval capital L. Now we can compute the mean of this reference sample, which is mu r. And so we will now decide to define an acceptance area and a rejection area. That is to say, if the mean of the collected sample, so the sample which is compared to the reference sample, is in the rejection area, well, we reject the sample, and if it is in the acceptance area, we accept the sample. By doing that, we have defined a threshold which is linked to the reference sample, and we just compare the means of the collecting sample and of our reference sample. So by using this decision function, we get the following performance. The first thing to see is that we have absolutely 0% of false negative. False negative is when the function validates a relayed sample. So this is the dramatic response of a decision function, because we do not detect relay in the case of false negative. So we achieve 0% of false negative in all our tests, which is great, but we still have some percentage of false positives, and in some case we have almost 4%, which can seem to be acceptable, but in fact remains a lot. So with this article, we came up with some remarks that we wanted to improve, some facts that we wanted to improve for the paper. So in current works, we are currently first of all enlarging our experimental setup with larger distances, because for now we have only measurement in France, and we need to know if the times remains stable in a more international context. We also want to enhance the decision function performances, because as you saw, we have an unsatisfying percentage of false positives, and we also want to propose a complete implementation of the protocol to test it in a real setup. And finally, we want also to estimate the overhead in time and computation, and the overhead the protocol can cause to the network. So that's it. Thank you all for your attention, and I will be glad to answer your questions.